at the end of the presentation. With that, now I'll turn it over to Dennis.
Thank you very much. Just wait for the presentation to come up. Great. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you tonight. On behalf of all of my team at Leggett Architects, we are very proud of the work that we've accomplished with you so far to date, so I'm very excited to be presenting to you tonight, especially with Kira and Dr. James and Dr. Dixon. Thank you for being here. We have finished our Phase 5. So the main goal was to initiate conversation about what the possibilities could be. What will the district look like to achieve the vision of a portrait of graduate for the students of Columbus City Schools? And this report tonight will encapsulate a lot of, or all of the engagement that we've done to date and discuss the engagement that we've had, that we have scheduled coming up. And today is sort of our kickoff of moving into our final engagement phase, what we're calling transform. So we're going to be summarizing the results of what we saw in Phase 5 and having a chance to really have in-depth discussion amongst them and having a chance to make recommendations amongst your community members as well to what we want our master plan to look like. We have our dates established. They have not changed. So we have our sites, and this is the same information that we've provided in the flyer. So the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, I hope you're all ready because we're going to be starting at Columbus Alternative High School, and we hopefully will, as I mentioned before, have a lot of riveting discussion and challenging conversation at times, I'm sure. But that's what we're here to do and help solve the problem. So excited to get started. Our outreach, we have had 12 actually engagement sessions due to conversations through our regional ones. Our all region meetings have actually stemmed additional conversations. Our simulation activity has had a lot of energy behind it. We've been asked to present to many different groups, as well as we are trying to get into, and we have scheduled to get into all high schools and all middle schools, so the student voice is heard over the course of the engagement and through this simulation activity. So you can see the numbers of simulations completed and the total participants. That is only to date. Tomorrow, just for example, we are meeting with our third and final bus garage or bus station and 2 more schools. So the engagement process is ongoing, and it will continue to be ongoing through our online activities. The FMP website has our information compiled and the simulation available for download and an online version. And then we also have handouts for every single school. So the engagement has been available, whether it's in person, online, or even a hard copy that people can fill in and complete and either email to us or email to the website. And so there's ability to participate in every way possible. The engagement is far out, as far reaching as we can possibly make it. Going through some of the rules of the simulation that has helped us provide our data. There is the 2/3 rule. If a building to renovate is 2/3 the cost of replacing, the OFCC will not fund. They are 30% of our funding entity. So when you look at the expanse of what this master plan will be, following those rules is definitely the right thing to do. And then we had our simulation rules with the co-funding minimal school sizes of 1,200 students for high school, 800 students for a middle school, and 600 students for an elementary school. Some images of our student engagement. We've been in several high schools and middle schools, as I mentioned, to date, and the participation is, it's a lot of, and just to be honest, it's been a lot of fun. The students are a little leery when they see a group of people come in with papers and then start setting up blocks. They're not really sure what we're doing. And then when we start talking about how we want their voice in changing the vision of Columbus City Schools, helping us, and when I use that term very deliberately, about you are helping us design what the future of your school district could be. And then they are all in. It's been a lot of fun. And the ideas that they come up with have been really inspiring. So we've been, as of today, we have been to 30% of the high schools, 20% of the middle schools, over 200 students reached, and we have scheduled through the first week of December to get to the remainder of all of those facilities. Staff engagement. We have had conversations that are just as enthusiastic, but with a different energy. And not that that's a bad energy at all. It's really constructive because the teachers and the staff are understanding that this is generational change. This isn't we're fixing the air conditioning. The staff is really starting to embrace the fact that you are changing the district from top to bottom and inside and out. And how do you want to help us do that? And when we've had that approach, they've been really, really great to work with. So you can see through our staff engagement, we've reached almost every entity within Columbus City Schools. So we've had many, many participants, we've had many simulations, and what we've been doing is the energy behind one will lead someone to say, well, now this team needs to do it because I want to get their opinion. And it's just been more and more exciting as we've been moving forward. And then the community engagement. We started off, people were a little hesitant about what we were doing. And then by the time we got to the last session, we had repeat, what I call repeat customers. Is that we had people come up to me and say, I had some new ideas and I wanted to see how they would sit with the group. And so there was a lot of enthusiasm behind the community engagement, especially towards the end. So we had 13 engagement meetings and we scheduled only 8. So we've had a series of open houses for Columbus elected officials. This past week we've had the city auditor, for example, was here performing the simulation. And just to tell you about the vigor behind the conversation, the high school board, because I know most of you have actually participated in the simulations, we spent an hour on just the high school. So there was a lot of, not only are we making decisions, we want to make the right decisions. So I really appreciated the energy behind it. Here's some of our key themes. You can see that for those of you who did, and actually all of you did participate in the simulation exercise. We had all the Post-it notes. We have, the office at Leggett Architects is decorated with sheets and sheets of colorful Post-it notes. And you can see the key themes. And so the understanding of the bigger schools for more opportunity has really resonated. That is something that both the staff, the community, and the students have really understand and have become supporters behind that idea. The district-wide equity. There are going to be some challenging conversations from a programmatic standpoint of how do we provide as much as we can throughout, and that the concept of having newer, bigger schools and being able to spread that is really gaining a lot of support. And then the idea of leveraging existing sites, that we have all of this land in the city. We should be using what we have. Corporate and community partnerships. This has come up at every single meeting. And what I've really appreciated about these comments, specifically with that comment, is that it's not, you know what, you should do this, and then they walk away. It's, we should talk to someone, I know someone, let me make a call, is there a way I can reach out to you? And so the idea of partnership, not only amongst, with the group, but how we can actually put some of these community partnerships in motion and where we can get it going. So the idea, just instead of it being a concept out there, there's really starting to get boots on the ground of who we can talk to and how we can engage them. The idea of the number of schools. When one of my favorite parts of the simulation, we did it with the executive leadership team a couple of weeks ago. And one of the area superintendents, I had a question, so he raised his hand and he just said, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to give me more purple blocks. I need more purple blocks. And it was sort of tongue in cheek, but he was serious, and there was an understanding of there's just too many buildings. The access to community health, along with the partnership, this is something that has been told to us that is very important. This has been a theme that's been discussed, Mr. Chairman, in even the meeting that you were attending at the Metropolitan Library, that the idea of having health centers within the school, making the schools be a place where families can get help, is something that is very, very important. And then student need versus school size was a question that has come up at every one of these sessions. So finding the appropriate size based upon what the students are feeling, what they would be comfortable with, along with the opportunity. So it wasn't just so much of build the biggest school you can. It was let's find that balance. Now, what did the data tell us? What did the simulations tell us? What were the results of all of these simulations that we've gone through? At the high school, there are currently 21. After the average that came up to us after all of the compiling of all of the simulations to date, there were 12 high schools shown. And the note on the bottom is there are 7 that are accounted for currently that were the blue blocks that have already been completed through the facility master plan. For the middle schools, there are 24 currently. The average shown through the simulations was showing 15. 9 middle school facilities are newly constructed. And then for the elementary schools, currently there are 66. And after the simulations, the result, the average shown through the data of the simulations was 42. Currently, there are 36 newly constructed or renovated. So in a total, there are 112 facilities. The simulation results, the data that was given to us after all of these, was showing an average of 69 facilities. And 46 of those have currently, or are currently newly constructed or renovated. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Kira, for our Chief Academic Officer, for an update from her.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kira Sloanbach, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet with you tonight. The purpose of this portion of the presentation is for our Academic Services Office to share our 4 design principles. And these principles will not only guide our work as we develop programs, but also act as levers for this committee as you move through the FMP process. As our team developed our design principles, we rooted our thinking in the foundation you see here on the screen in green. These principles are community, sustainability, equity, and inclusion. And on top of this foundation are 4 lenses that helped guide our work. It is our goal to create or help create innovative spaces and opportunities that are fluid and not limited to the current thoughts in education. We know we're preparing for future learners, and our thinking and design needs to be reflective of that. Pandemic learning has taught us many lessons about resiliency and flexibility, and we can harness these lessons as we vision for the future. We aim to be forward-thinking. We have to remember that we're helping prepare graduates for industries that have yet to be discovered. and we need to partner with employers to ensure that we're providing opportunities so that our students are competitive for high demand and high wage professions. And lastly, our portrait of a graduate and those 6 competencies are always in the forefront of our minds when we vision for academic services and Columbus City School students. So with that, our 4 design principles are students leading the way, personalized learning, whole person focus, and flexibility and access. And these principles align to our 3 board goals to strengthen reading proficiency, close opportunity gaps, and develop portrait-ready graduates. And we can target these goals by providing equitable and engaging opportunities for students, developing strong learning communities, and focus on complete student well-being. The students leading the way, we know Portrait of the Graduate is our North Star, and it represents the hopes, dreams, and aspirations we have for every student. And at the heart of that is students leading the way. We often ask ourselves, how do students learn best? And we know students need agency and voice in their own learning. This is about opportunities for students to engage in flexible learning, alternative pathways, and increasing their access to partnerships with higher education institutions. But most importantly, students, we want to hear from you and what genuinely interests and inspires you. We encourage students to think about the future and not be bound by what we've done previously, but really vision with us. Personalized learning. One of our strengths as a district is our inherent diversity. Our students have different needs. We want to ensure our facilities and programs are responsive and supportive to students' unique abilities, and we're committed to facilitating our students' journey. Health and wellness are foundational to student learning and community well-being. Physical and emotional safety are certainly our priorities. We have an opportunity to consider partnerships with community health service providers and to promote healthy lifestyles with our physical locations. Another strength for Columbus City Schools is our wealth of community support. The pandemic, more than ever, taught us that it truly takes a community to care for and grow our students and our staff. And whole person focus, really, that design principle helps us harness that. And lastly, flexibility and access. One of the things Dr. Dixon often reminds us is to dream and be innovators. We need our facilities to focus on the future. Our academic services team is committed to ensure our students have access to innovative services and pathways regardless of their ability level or their location. And with that, the next steps we consider as a team and as a district is to take these 4 design principles and help understand and problem solve and thought partner with them on what does it mean in their lives. So what do these 4 principles mean to a student or families, teachers, and our community partners? And then of course, what do the design principles look like when we consider grade bands or feeder patterns? And with that, I'm going to, before we get to questions, pass it back to Dennis. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kira. All right, with that, we have a couple of items for discussion I would like to have an opportunity to hear your opinions on. And these are other items as we were going through some of the notes that were either submitted in the parking lot portion of our simulation activity, or if they were listed as another side note for a certain location or on the post-it notes that were presented. So, committee, I ask you the first one, career tech. This is something that has been discussed at length during all of our simulation activity sessions. What are your thoughts on having career tech centrally located or distributed regionally?
So I think we should hear from the group. And in full disclosure, I have a bias. So I went to a public high school that was career tech in New York City, right? That was focused specifically on career tech. So my bias comes from that perspective. So I think it would be best to hear from some of the other group members, committee members.
May I start?
Yes.
And part of it, I don't know if we have enough information to know what students need to actually have, I don't feel qualified to say that we can do it, we can distribute this, or we can't. And I just don't know. But I also think we should broaden that discussion, because part of it is to look at what we want to do citywide and what we want to do at the local schools. I think that's some guidance we need, because the central schools, and I love the central schools. I have a kid at COS where it is a wonderful program. But all those centralized programs take kids who would be in the neighborhood schools and make it harder to fix the neighborhood problem. On the other hand, can we do the programs? Can you actually duplicate those programs or give the kids what they need in the neighborhood schools? I think this is the bigger question, and I just don't know if we have enough information on it to give a thoughtful opinion. That's the other question. We had this with the medically fragile kids as well. Does it make more sense to have the centralized medically fragile kids at schools like Coleraine, or does it? I have no clue, and I don't know if anyone else here does either. What makes more sense for those kids? And I think,
Okay.
yeah, I'll stop with that.
All right. My comment is somewhat similar, but I also wanted to look at, and I'm not Tiffany White, I'm Julia Lynn Walker is over there, but the issue for me is just that question of education as a whole and the way it's changing. And when we talk about flexibility, for me the question is, how do we incorporate, thank you, these kinds of career options into the curriculum, regardless of where the students are, so that they begin to have some idea of what's available, because I find that many students really just have no clue what they could possibly consider, let alone begin to actively plan for it. And I think it's beyond career counseling per se, but really having before them concrete experiences or opportunities to experience different options. And so, but I also understand the need to have some centralized location, because there are certain resources that would be important to have in one place so the student gets a full opportunity. So I would look at some hybrid option but I would strongly encourage, and I guess it goes beyond hopefully the physical environment will provide those options, but you would have to work in concert with the curriculum to ensure that the teachers marry the two. Manny?
So, I'm a little biased also. Two of my sons went to the downtown high school, and I can't tell you how pleased, I mean uber pleased, from Ms. Watson on down, the whole school process. And I think it should mirror that. And the reason I say that is because both of my sons, one started at Western, one started at Fort Hayes before they all graduated. And the parent-child relationship in terms of how did you do today at school, especially at Whetstone, was more about what was happening during class that was a disruption. Once they both got to downtown, that whole conversation changed because it was a focus. And I think the bigger issue is that we don't celebrate those situations. We don't talk about how well those programs are run. I mean, Nationwide comes into downtown regularly to grab those kids for, internships. My youngest son had an internship with the Rhodes Rhodes Tower for the state. And it was just because of how well he was doing in his class. They both were in computer programming. But I think it needs to be a situation where those programs need to get as much, if maybe sometimes more, credibility than some of the college prep programs. Some of the college prep programs take precedence to everything else, but we all know we have friends and family that make great lifestyles from, alternative, education. So I loved that situation. Kudos to Ms. Watson, Dr. Dixon. Mm-hmm. But really, I love those programs, so I am biased, but I'm telling you, the relationship alone from parent to child changed when they went to that centrally located school. school.
Thank
Because
you.
now you knew they were in school for what we tell them they're going for. You ain't in school for all these other things, the fashion show and everything else. You were in school for this. It changed.
Thank you.
Tommy, any comments?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, there's probably a few programs, maybe you do need to have a couple different locations for those because they're bigger programs and maybe you want them like separated around town. But there's specialized things that probably does make sense to have just one location. So I think they're great for the students that want to head down that path, and for other students that, are in their neighborhood schools and they like that path, it's great for them too.
For me, the hybrid, because of the regional and spatial issues, depending on what program is there. If you have automotive, you of course need a completely different space, and that may not be able to be accommodated in some of the neighborhoods or some of the centrally located buildings. So I do like the hybrid model and some of the other things that were mentioned, just because of the needs, the spatial needs of some of the programs will dictate where they can be housed.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think one thing we should look at is, can we use, for instance, like Fort Hayes to start combining multiple programs into the same building? Because a lot of these programs are just too darn small. They're very important, but they're too darn small for a 1,200 person building. And if we could create a complex on Fort Hayes that had, this wing is the International Baccalaureate wing, and this wing is the career tech, this career tech, and that wing is that career tech. And if we could use that space to be centralized, maybe we could preserve what's good about those programs without draining space that we need, that neighborhood schools need. And we could right-size the programs. There also be a flexibility. If 5 years from now, or more like 20 years from now, one tech program isn't nearly as important as it is today, you can adjust. And you'll have space because you'll do it all in one place.
Good.
But that,
Good comment. So now I could share my bias, right? Because I think it's important, because my bias isn't just from going through a tech school. We're talking about what I do as a day job, right? I run a major construction company. And there's a couple of things that I think are relevant to the discussion. NetJets put their headquarters in Central Ohio because Ohio State agreed to increase the quality of aeronautical engineering programs they had, so that NetJets now had a resource to drive into to attract and retain aeronautical engineers. Those that don't know, the Center of Automotive Research at Ohio State University, Honda has a major facility there, and it's not just Honda, there are other manufacturers, but Honda plays a major role in that. So the thought-provoking question I have would be, there should be some level of an appetizer, if you would. How do we intrigue the students? Should that be in the middle school? Should we be testing whether or not students should want to go in the vocational programs in the middle school? So these vocational programs light are in the middle school, but in the high school, there's a lot of wisdom on why you would want that centralized. And if you think about the world of tomorrow, technology is taking over my industry and every other industry. So the tools and equipment and resources it's going to take to have state-of-the-art facilities most likely are going to change what we plan today. It won't, 10 years from now, it'll be different. And I look at these engineering schools where major corporations are making equipment investments in those programs so that school themselves do not have to pay for certain types of equipment. So this concept of having a centralized facility is more than just centralized on what we can afford. We actually would then be able to have partnerships with corporations that have a vested interest in our students, right? So there's a career path that may begin at middle school for our students, and then those partnerships, because I see it in colleges, would then provide an opportunity maybe when we have technological advancements that we have to make that we may not be able to afford completely. Industry might be able to come in and really creating this partnership that we need with industry. So, of course, I waited to start last because I definitely have a bias, right? And I was clear about that. But my bias only comes from my entire life career, right? I think there are 12 US presidents that are self-taught. I didn't go to college, right? I'm a lifelong learner, and I came from vocational school. So, you know, I wanted to make sure that I spoke last so that I wouldn't like push my opinion on people so that we heard everyone's voice. So I think we have one person that didn't get a chance to speak, though.
Also, when you came in, the question, we're just starting our items for discussion. The question was about career tech. Do you, and during the course of the simulations, there was a lot of, and you've been, thank you for participating in several, so I appreciate that.
Yes.
And
And making a TikTok with me. My first one, just so you know.
The idea of career tech has come up in every situation. Now, what would that sort of program, do you think in your high school environment, would that be something that would be appreciated, spread out amongst the district, or is that sort of, as Mr. Negron was saying, to have it more concentrated? Do you have an opinion one way or the other?
Do I need a mic?
Just go ahead and lean closer to it. I think it'll be okay.
Having a concentrated and specialized type of career tech in certain areas, I feel like keeping that somewhere would be necessary, but having it more available to others, like schools that generally don't have any other type of funding for specific technology, having that in those schools, it'll benefit them more than the specialty schools like Cause, or they don't have a lot of funding, do they? But specialty schools like Fort Hayes and schools that tend to have more engineering programs like Northland does. Having those concentrated ones, it should be important for like certain types. Like if you want robotics, have a school that specializes in robotics, but at the same time have robotics available to others who can't lottery into another school. So having a balance between them, but I say focus more on spreading them out throughout the district would be more essential in my opinion.
Very good, thank you. Carol?
Yeah, so I just wanted to take an opportunity because this is such great conversation, and we're certainly on a similar path or similar line of thinking. Mr. Chair, as far as starting earlier, absolutely, that is an important vision. Lean in on student interest surveys and strength finders to really help our students find and have access to their path to success and graduation. And to the point that everyone's made tonight, the next step that we're talking about when we think about these design principles is really to help us find these answers together so that we're able to replicate these programs while we lean into equitable access. So that you don't have to be in a certain location, or we have an opportunity for each student that wants one, and definitely starting very early. Sorry, Dennis.
No, please. I appreciate the comments. Thank you very much. Dr. Dixon, would you like to?
No, I was going to say, won't you tell them about what's happening in Highland Middle School, Hiltonia Middle School? The CT.
Yes, so at Hiltonia Middle School, did you want to?
No, I was just going to tell, so we have some programs that are starting, but I think if you highlight that, it demonstrates in the middle school that we are seeing interest, and Hiltonia is one.
Hiltonia, we've seen in a great interest, a small program at a middle school there in construction, and the students are enjoying it, and the staff is really engaged. So we've just seen really positive impact, to Dr. Dixon's point and to your point early.
Mm-hmm. And it also demonstrates what that principal is trying to do on that side of town. They want to expand it to more career programs. They're even asking us to put mods in the back of the building. So there's, they are talking to the families, and the principals being responsive to students at middle school who already know, because some students figured out quite early that they want to do something different, and engage in them, and finding teachers who are leaving their industries, and they're coming to be teachers is really exciting to see. And kids don't even realize they're being, oh, I forgot my math, they're being more engaged in mathematics and science, right? So when you go in those classes and you're asking students questions, they don't even realize, 7th and 8th graders, that this is really some of these calculus term, and it's really allowing them to have some exposure. I think one of the things that we're asking to our business partners is allowing our students to come see it, right? Because they see it and touch it while they're engaging in these classes. And I think that's something we see in our high schools, because they're taking, they have these business partners that are coming to the schools and working with them. Can you imagine that for our middle school students that know they want to do something with their hands, and to actually go and be mentored? And that's what we're starting. So you're absolutely right. We should not wait until 9th grade. We should be saying this from the very beginning, from elementary school up, exposing students to careers, multiple pathways, and letting them getting some experience, and doing it that in a way that everyone has equitable access, but also maybe a hybrid model where you have a premier program in construction, and you have that. This one example, I had a chance to go to Finland some years ago, and it was interesting that students, there have students that have a college pathway and a career tech pathway, and they took us to a furniture store, and every piece of furniture was made by the students. It was fascinating. I thought it was a showroom, but everyone took pride in their work, and they showed us homes model homes that they build, and it was just really fascinating when the culture prides either pathway, and it says, hey, whatever pathway you want to go, we would endorse it, we would support it, and I think we have to do more of that in America. Certain pathways seem more supreme than others, but it was just really interesting to actually see it, and the pride of whomever you met with really said, this is the pathway I chose, I'm proud of it, and look at the good work that I'm doing.
Thank you, Dr. Dixon. I completely agree with you. That was well articulated.
Yeah.
Dr. Dixon, I'm glad you brought that up. One of our engagement sessions with the students was at that Hiltonia construction class, and a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, and the engagement with the staff with those kids is quite remarkable. So they were a great group of kids to work with. Any other additions to that?
Just one, building on that, I think if we could do the more centralized campus to not just be tech, other advantages are, especially if you had schools like COS within COS, and schools could maintain their own identity, but then share resources such as the lunchroom. That also deals with the problem of kids being siloed and only being with kids with exactly the same interests all the time. And they can also do things like have a soccer team, have a football team, have a volleyball team, which a lot of kids in a lot of the specialty schools can't do today. Or they have to get on a bus after school and go halfway across town to do it. And you could have, there's a lot of opportunities there to actually preserve the integrity of individual programs, but also to have kids meet people differently than they are and give them opportunities they're not having now.
So the pendulum swinging back to the equity conversation of the school should be able to provide any opportunity the student wants.
And some kids could maybe do a class in the other school if they were particularly advanced. If you have someone who's doing the tech who's also very good at music, they could go to the Fort Hayes, which is just across the street. Or
yeah, what's interesting when you say that, so I've really benefited from this. There was a pilot program in New York City at the time when I got into school, and they just started that year that I went to high school, and it was work a week, go to school a week. And actually I introduced that to Fort Hayes, and that's where that came from, is when we started it at Fort Hayes. So I would say that the thought-provoking or creative idea is, how would there be some modifications to the academic calendar? We all know what STEM is, right? Well, the new STEM is STEAM. They want arts in it. So they want to incorporate arts. And there are researchers today that are looking for people that are like me, self-taught, to evaluate their research, because I'm not, I don't have the Socraterian methodology of problem solving and learning, right? I'm self-taught, I'm not bragging about it. So there's students that are self-taught that we think, people that are self-taught think differently, right? That's why we're storytellers, right? So so I would challenge that whole concept, because that to me is just changing an academic calendar so that you're able to have flexibility so that students have different exposure to things, right? Because you could have this specialty expertise, but then there could be portions of time where they don't do that. They go back to a home base potentially and get exposed to some of the things you're talking about. So I think your point is they need the exposure to more than just one area. Right? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
No,
just trying to
they get the
just-
benefit, the integrity of the program they're most interested in, and the benefit of possibility of reaching out.
Yeah, because the challenge you have with having a single focused area is then the students don't have that connection to the community for which they live in. Go ahead.
No, I just want to chime in, because I think with the way that both you guys are talking, you're building a process. But the bigger thing that I see in the communities is people don't know about the programs, and if they hear a little bit about them, they don't know how to get involved. And that part, if that's made easier, then we can do everything that you guys are talking about and more. But somebody said that some of the programs are so small. All of that would change, even if at the middle schools you gave them these options that were easily accessible. They just flat out don't know. One of the things I do in both my community centers is I meet with the schools and I ask them, what can we do to make things better for young people in terms of where they want to go. I had a young person who didn't want to go to the school that he was going from his middle school, and I told him about the lottery program. I'm like, your parents don't know about lotterying you, and they had no idea, and I don't know what their everyday is, but that changed a lot for him. I mean, so many things that if we put it in front of them and make it available, all of these things that you're talking about, they're going to be more worthwhile.
Good point. Thank you.
I was going to reiterate, we also have, as we mentioned the example earlier of Hiltonia, but we also have STEAM happening at Dominion Middle School, and really how we can think about increasing those opportunities younger so that we increase employability. I also think about World Language Middle School and the skills we're building in those students. Certainly that make them a unique candidate in the workforce as a graduate to be bilingual. So I just wanted to mention that we do have these happening, and it's exciting to have this support and this comment as we think about growing those.
Yeah, maybe it would be an opportunity to have like a week or two of an immersion experience where kids they have a complete listing of different programs, and you can go to 10 different programs within these 2 weeks and spend a day in this building. Kind of similar to how we test for, gifted and talented in, I think, was it 6th grade or 7th grade? If you did the same thing where you're exposing kids, you can pick 10, 20 different programs, and during this 2-week period, you are transported to those different schools to spend a day in that program to see if it sparks your interest. So then you have a more educated child going to their parents. I like this school, this school, this school, this program, and this program. So that we're not solely dependent on the parents knowing or the child themselves knowing. They've gone in, they've touched it, they've touched the cars, they've gone to culinary, they've gone to COS for a day, and they have a more educated, hands-on experience of, I'm interested in these 3-4 things.
Really good comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, if one thing I can add, I think one of the things we have to do, I love those ideas, we still need one more step of rethinking what it looks like. I think we're still thinking about it within the 4 walls, this certain framework. So there have been a lot of studies that talk about when we talk about student agency, how do we give students not only agency but freedom, right? So to take someone's idea to say, if I want a cause experience and a Fort Hays experience, why does it have to happen on one campus? Do we trust our students enough to say, well, half of the day you can spend here, or you may travel, you get, here are all the centers that happen, 10 places that you can be educated, and our kids can go in and out of all of those 10 spaces. What would that look like? I have no idea, right? But it's some of that. Then then a district can say, wow, this could be equitable, right? We don't have to have 20 models. We can have 10 models. The models don't move, but the students move, right? And it could be through transportation. I mean, all of those considerations, right? But maybe just really thinking out of the box, something that's so innovative and so different that we're not housing kids or housing programs. The programs can move, the kids can move, and I think that would be more equitable because people are still, I think, not just us, but I like this store. I like Target. I like Target. You can't get me to go to another store because I like Target. Well, you can have a Target experience somewhere else, but if you only go to Target. So I think for our kids, if I really want a culinary program, you only offer it here. Well, man, I think here's another place I can have a culinary program. And so I think we have to think about it that way. There is a way to think about it. And maybe the culinary program is at a college, I don't know, or and you go there for that program, or maybe a program is at Nationwide Insurance and they have, all the ninth graders take a class there, right on site. But I think we have an opportunity to build something just extraordinary and really think outside the box. With the STEAM program, we've already partnered with Ohio State. Ohio State said they are interested in making sure STEAM is a part of their platform. And we had a big announcement a couple months ago. And so our teachers in Region 3 will be working with those professors and getting training on STEAM. Right? So now we have to make sure on our end that we're incorporating that in our elementary schools, our middle schools. So I think I love the energy and the ideas, and we want you guys to push us to really keep thinking outside of the box about what it could ultimately look like.
Yeah, those are really good comments. I do think that what you said and what you started to touch on, that there's something here about communication that we've got to figure out. And the worst thing that we do as humans is communicate, right? Honestly, we're horrible, right? So as a human, the imperfection in who I am, I'm not a good communicator as much as I think I am, even as a businessman. And then we're trying to do it. We're trying to communicate to students and families. And so but there's the point to be made. How do we do that? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think that needs to be a part of whatever this discussion is, because the lack of knowledge of what some of the opportunities are. You came up with some creative ideas. You talked about some really dynamic ideas, Dr. Dixon. But I think for me, that foundational concept of how do we make sure that they know that there are opportunities and inspire these young minds to just be exposed to things. That, to me, I think that's whatever we do, that's got to be a big part of this plan.
One more point, because both you and Dr. Dixon brought up the question of STEAM, and I'd like to, and I know we've got 6 more topics. I don't know how we're going to get through this.
No, we're talking, this is about student life right now, so what could possibly be
I want to revise the concept of STEAM and make the A agriculture. And I know that agriculture as a specialized subject will only be co-funded for the larger schools, but I'm also aware that 62 schools currently have school gardens. And there is a School Garden of Ohio program, and there's a farm to school program process, And so there exist ways, I think it's really, again, it's another area that is very important in terms of opening students up to various kinds of career opportunities as well as just lifelong interests. And at this point, as schools the facilities get changed, I think it would be very important to ensure that each and every school has a school garden and what I'm encouraging, I'm with the Afrocentric Advisory Council, and I'm working right now with the development of a school garden there. and we call it an external learning lab. It's an outdoor learning environment, all right? Because again, we're making it applicable to the current curriculum. And so the various state standards are being addressed as the garden is developed, as they, will really start planning in January inside. But again, you said, in terms of the construction, students don't even realize how much they're learning in terms of the core subjects just by doing this. So I want to put agriculture on the table, and specifically school gardens, and then the question of farm to school is much broader because it looks at procurement in addition to learning activities. So that's a much broader topic, but certainly one that should be considered as you move forward.
Great. Thank you very much. Chairman, anything else for this topic?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, our next topic that was brought up on several occasions, especially while we were doing the simulation for the middle school activity, was middle school athletics. What is your opinion on an investment in expanding and improving middle school athletics?
And I said this before, but like Mr. Negron, I'm biased. I'm wrecking parks. I mean, I'm biased. But to me, it should be a partnership because that's one of our missions is to introduce all these different sports to young people and then to have them furthered as they get older. And middle school is just that breeding ground. And I see a lot of middle schools and they'll have their own, like Dominion had it for years, they'll have their own league in their school, which is great. However, once again, we're talking a similar thing in terms of a lot of people aren't able to, participate because it's not close to home, it's not in the community that they are from. They're bussed in and out, and I'm saying don't stop that process, but continue it and add it on to your neighborhood community centers, just out of partnership so that you can get all of those young people who may have a talent, who may have a knack, but they may not have, the ability because they're bussed in and out, to go, back to school, to get to that practice, to get the games. Because I've seen them, they're coming to a couple of practices, they're coming to a couple of games, and it's nothing worse to destroy a kid than to tell them that they're doing something wrong that they have no control over because they can't get there. So I'm just saying it's just a partnership, but like I said, I'm biased. It's part of what I do every day.
I was recently pleasantly surprised, I must say, with this question because I thought it might be too difficult again and Afrocentric in terms of the transport issues, et cetera. But they've started with 2 grades, and the parents are 100% behind it. With the PTA, they came out, they see it as a spirit activity, and they were gung-ho, so much so that they went and bought some T-shirts because there were no uniforms, of course, for the kids. This is 5th grade, I think, and they're gung-ho. It's just put a new life, into an area that didn't exist before. So before I was hesitant, but I said, okay, given the importance of this to the families, they see it important in terms of, their own children learning just how to cooperate and work together as a team and all that kind of thing. And they like coming out to support them as a family activity. So as a PTA now, we're going to support this and find other ways in which we can build, and see that other parents get involved and then other grades get involved. So before I would have said, low burn, nope, now I'm like, push for it.
I would love to see middle school athletics expanded a little bit where we include 6th graders, not necessarily in the competitive part, because it's so competitive that kids who are just getting interested are cut from the team too fast before they get a chance to develop. So I think if we had with the 6th grade almost like a development type of thing where, yeah, I'm interested, I don't know if I really want to play, but I just want to have fun, where it's not as competitive as when they get to the 7th and 8th grade when it kind of gets serious. I think if we expanded middle school athletics, at least let the 6th graders practice with the middle school teams, or just have some kind of exposure in the 6th grade, because in some of our schools, they are part of middle school, but they're completely excluded from all of the middle school activities because they are 6th graders.
Oh, no. Touching up on that idea, maybe I don't think adding them to maybe like a league, like how most middle schoolers, they compete against other city around the city. That makes sense. Yes, I understand. But the 6th graders, when they don't have something to look forward to in terms of competition or working towards something, they generally don't have the motivation to do it. So how would you do that?
I would use it almost as a development opportunity where you're trying to make the team, you're trying to get the skills, so you do need to
So
practice.
you would say that to use the 6th grade idea just to introduce it as a means to get into the 7th grade or 8th grade.
Yeah, and to just play. Yeah,
just to play?
No, but just play.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just as far as an investment in middle school athletics, that's what I think would be another investment, because some kids don't come out because they don't feel that they're good enough, but they haven't had the opportunity. Because nowadays, if you don't have the funds to play in AAU, you really don't get the opportunity to practice and hone your skills. So that's just my idea for throwing out for middle school athletics. And again, I'm biased because I love sports, and you just see kids quitting where they're on the cusp and they just need some more competitive work and just have fun.
Yeah, middle school athletics is something I definitely am behind as well. I grew up in Western Ohio, and when my kids were coming into middle school, to find out that there weren't a lot of the programs, that there wasn't middle school football. I played middle school football in my day. To know that it wasn't even an option here for them, that was kind of weird. I work with our athletic boosters, and talking to our high school wrestling coach, it's a big disadvantage for our high school wrestlers. They don't get introduced until 9th grade, and that was something else. Back in 7th and 8th grade, kids were able to learn to wrestle. Either you liked it, maybe you moved on to another sport, but it keeps kids focused, it teaches leadership. I like the fact that also some of these kids need additional exercise, and there's focus that they can learn, and I just part of the problem we have right now is facilities, though, too. Middle schools with basketball courts that are too small, just dimly lit. Facilities have got to get there for them, but to have the opportunities, kids, some of the teams we've played in, like, they've never had an opportunity to play baseball, and we have had coaches that go out, and most of the game they spend helping the other team learn, this is what you need to do. This is the strategy behind it. And to start in 6th grade, I think, is a tremendous idea, just to introduce it, because you can't cover all these things in gym class, and not every kid, that's not the focus. But I think starting in 6th grade, that is a great idea, and I think kids will be excited, and I'd like to see a lot of our athletes stay in our district too. You see a lot of probably some families that leave because they see better facilities, they see more of a focus in athletics, and they don't see that path at Columbus City schools. And I think that should change. I think that we have a lot of tremendous athletes, and not everyone's going to go to college and play. Not everyone's going to be a pro athlete, but everything that the teamwork, the leadership, and just physical fitness and things like that, and competition, I think, gets a lot of kids too to focus in on schoolwork, which at the end of the day is the most important thing. But I would love to see our athletics in middle school, I think, is where kids really start to come into it. They see it in elementary school, but middle school, they're ready to go. So I'm a big proponent.
I have two things on that. First of all, I think having the ability to do 6th grade non-competitive sports is important, because at least where my kid goes to middle school, if your parents didn't pay to send you to leagues, you're not going to be on the team. because you didn't have the chance to develop the skills you need to be on a competitive team. So that's from an equity point of view. And if you, again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, one of the problems that kids at the Gifted Academy have, I guess, is Indianola might have the same problem. I don't know if the World Language Academy has their own athletic teams, but there's no athletics at those schools. If you started to centralize some of the, if you centralize specialty programs instead of scattering them across the city, you'd have the chance to give all those middle school kids a chance to participate. Now, personally, athletics weren't all that important to me. I was on the track team freshman and senior year of high school. That was it. But I know it is important for a lot of people. It keeps a lot of people in school.
Really good comments, and I'll end the comments with this way. I'll try to summarize. And again, I have a bias too. I grew up in the inner city, and I saw what happened in the inner city where I grew up with kids that were in athletics and kids that weren't in athletics, and watched the disparity and what happened. So I think that inner city kids, more than anything else, they need a connection. And there are disparities in sports that do cause some issues with competition, and I don't know the way out of that. But I also, through President Obama's my brother's keeper, I've mentored middle schoolers, and so it hadn't changed since I was a kid, is what I'm saying. So relevant to today, inner city kids have the same challenges, and sports do provide an opportunity to keep them busy, be part of a team, have some self-esteem. How it's done, I don't know, but I'm a firm believer in connecting kids with sports, and there's a lot that happens out of that. And I think that it would be a real big mistake if we didn't take that into serious consideration, because it does more than just connect the kids. There's a lot more that it does besides that, and there's a lot more to this than just this physical space. So thank you. I think this is an important subject, though.
And to segue into the second point, the reason that I brought it up, and I really thank you for the very insightful conversation about that topic, is that middle school athletic and outdoor facilities are not something that is typically co-funded by the state. So just keep in mind that importance, and as we're putting together the plan of how we want to see the middle school landscape intertwined with its athletics, that the district is going to, your recommendation of additional athletics, especially with outdoor facilities, that is going to be an additional investment. So please keep those thoughts in mind. And on that same topic about additional investment that will not be necessarily co-funded are fixed seat auditoriums. All the existing high schools currently, I believe all of them, have an auditorium. Is having an auditorium in the new high school facilities since it's not a co-funded investment, is it an important investment for the future high schools?
So we'll start with you first.
Me? Okay. The auditorium is, I feel like for some schools it would be a necessity, mainly because they have either performances like plays or ceremonies or things like that that need that type of atmosphere, and the seating to be somewhat fixed in a certain pattern for it to be giving the ambience you need for certain events that go on at schools. But my school hasn't really used the auditorium for anything for a while. But the auditorium, it's below par.
Yep.
Most auditoriums, they are below par. If auditoriums, they were, for example, you could either remove the seats or maybe somehow make the seating transformative or something like that, somewhat into something else that you could use for other types of other uses, it would be much better than having a regular auditorium, because they wear a lot.
Yep.
They get vandalized, they break, all of that. The money going into repairing them, it's a lot more than it really needs to be. So changing that in some way, as in not necessarily prioritizing it as something you have to have in every single school, but not disregarding it because it does have its uses.
Thank you.
I'm fascinated, it never occurred to me that there wouldn't be a time in which every school wouldn't come together as a school body. It just seems to me that that would be part of the life of the school, that the school body, as a body, would come together periodically throughout the course of that educational experience. So the idea that that doesn't happen on a regular basis just kind of overwhelms me momentarily. So clearly, I believe in auditoriums because I do, again, from my experience as well as how I think things should work, I do think it's important for the group to come together periodically as a whole. And there are certainly all kinds of flexible seating options available now so that you can have a space that is multi-purpose and including, seating the entire student body.
Yeah, like she said, multi-purpose auditorium would probably be the most ideal solution to the issue with auditoriums.
It's hard to have dedicated space with fixed seatings, no.
I think completely different, and because my experience, and I'm much older than this young lady over here, but we used our gym for pep rallies, and those things I still think about, years and years after I came out of high school. But with the technology now, I personally would like to see something that was, a lot bigger. Like, to me, I think nowadays, if you have a scenario like a graduation or a play like was talked about or something else, that it should have a grand stage to it. Even to the point to where maybe Columbus City Schools, they create a campus style that can fit a couple of these things, where that's what an auditorium is. And they have an indoor one and an outdoor one. And that's where the huge aquatic facility is, and some of these other things that we're going to be talking about. That should be a huge experience, to where if the play that you guys worked on for so many months is at this facility, now it's not just a school play, it's a city thing, and other places could come because that auditorium space or that complex was so diverse that people will want to rent the space from other places to come, plus, like, look at what we're talking about here with these TV screens, and what we were doing with TikTok, all the things that I didn't have as a kid. You make a facility where all that stuff is possible, now you get that energy back. You get that situation to where kids are going to work hard because they know, hey, the professor, teacher, whomever, they could say, hey, you're going to perform here. People all over the place are coming to see you. And it's not just a school play. It's a Columbus City School play where it's put on for everybody. So I think maybe not in every school, because they're not using them now. But if you change that focus to where you make it grand, you make it something to where, it's not in the school where at lunchtime they're using it as alternative for them going outside, and that's where it gets vandalized at. It's somewhere to where it's kept up, maybe it's rented out, and it's, utilized for more than just school. It's a huge, diverse space that could change things.
Good comments.
I think maybe not a traditional auditorium is the way to go down the like as we're going forward here. A multi-purpose room I think makes more sense, but have a big stage, like where the drama people can work. If they're working a play, they know they need to have that space to be able to practice that and work on it. And maybe they could have a performance there at the school, but if it's not used for that, you could have it be you could be the space where you have a meeting where you bring all the chairs in, and then you can take them all out. And it could also be additional gym space also. It could also be, you know, whatever you want it to be, but make sure that there still is a stage. So when you have certain performances, yes, you could have them there, but I like the idea of maybe having like a grand place where everybody, you know, this school's having a play there this week, this school's having a play there the following week. Everybody maybe doesn't need a super auditorium, but you know, you want to be able to have the stage and you want to be able to have it be multi-purpose. I think you don't want, I mean, not everyone meets every day, I guess, and to make it multifunctional is probably the way to go.
I think these are two thoughts. First, I think the function is the most important thing, whether it's fixed seat or not. And if you as an architect can come up with a way within the design parameters to give the whole school a place to gather, I think that's the critical thing. I'm not crazy about what they had at Clinton, where they had the stage at the end of the gym, but it worked. Not as great as what we have at Dominion now, but it works. And I guess my second point is the hard part is all these things are nice. I think that the difficult thing is when we start doing the math and seeing whether we can justify go to the taxpayers for it, and whether if having fixed seat auditoriums will put us over the edge of not having a viable bond issue, then maybe that's something we should think about. Look at partnerships, look at combining central. But I think that's part of the problem. If we go through these one at a time, we're always going to say, yes, I want that. Yes, I want that. Yes, because they're all good things to have. So we need some way to think about prioritizing.
Yep.
And if I could add one thing, I'd like to push us. You know, we think about our partners, right? You know, where could we have convening, right? And what does it mean? Do we have to have plays in our facilities? You know, could we take our students to another facility and not only expose them to what it's like to perform on another stage, a bigger stage, and then have that as a partnership, right? A partnership these days are Columbus City Schools Days for their students, right? And then one thing I love is, you know, when we think about outdoor concerts, you know, we have learned so much in the pandemic, right? I mean, now I think we want to do more outside. And what does music sound like outside versus playing on the inside? I mean, I think we can really push our thinking about how we utilize our space differently now. Just like we did in our homes. You know, we heard about so many people during the pandemic, you know, they went out, you know, to Home Depot and Lowe's and just totally revamped their backyards, right? And now they're using their outside, you know, their outdoor space differently. So I think that's the same way for schools. I learned, Mr. Harwick, when I was a principal at COS, you know, that inner courtyard, students were not eating in the cafeteria. So where are you guys going? Oh, Dr. Dixon, we eat out here. You know, I was like, oh my gosh. And we found ourselves moving the cafeteria tables to the inner courtyard because people didn't want to be in that space. So I agree. We can just really think out of the box about how we utilize our space differently. And do we want to make those investments in an auditorium space and it's not flexible and kids only convene 3 times a year? Or do we create a space that you can, you know, like this space, you know, you can move furniture in and out, and or partner with organizations. So again, really thinking about what that space, other future.
So when you think about, like, this is a real big bias for me.
Yeah.
My elementary school, my middle school, and my high school didn't have an auditorium. Okay? We graduated at St. John College. That's where I graduated from. So that's one bias. The other bias I have is I'm very involved in the arts.
Yep.
Okay? And performance spaces, and I'm a big partnership there. And to be an artist is to be poor. But if you know anything about arts funding, the people that fund arts are usually very wealthy people. And we are connected in the school system to just about every arts organization in the city of Columbus. And when you have performance space, you design a performance space for singing different than you do for talking. And they're very, very specific. So I think that there are strategic partnerships that we can create irrespective of the physical location. I had a dream that it would all be at Fort Hayes but that physically can't happen, okay? Only because, but it was only, but I do think that, and then what would happen is our students then would have the best of the best. So let's say the Children's Theater has a space that is utilized, but then one of our programs that have that same exact type of theater is able to use a state-of-the-art space. But then it's a community-funded space and not a Columbus City School space. Okay? Or an orchestra, the jazz, I'm on the jazz board, right? The jazz, you know, Byron's so dynamic, but, you know, there's special conditions that we just couldn't afford. So anyway, to point in that, I think these community partnerships are critical when you're doing auditoriums. And I don't think we need to get together as a group anymore. Corporately, I don't know that to me, what's more important to me is small, intimate, very focused meetings with groups of people, because these big, large gatherings, you know, they weren't effective, big company meetings. And again, remember, my bias is I didn't have an auditorium in elementary, middle school, and high school. Now, I think every other school in New York had it except the ones I selected. Okay, everyone but the ones I selected, but I went through school, and I think I did pretty good. But my exposure was going to Dr. Dixon. I was going to Radio City Music Hall, the Apollo Theater, Carnegie Hall. You know, I was going to all of these places, getting the exposure that I needed. Great. And I didn't mean to skip you.
Oh, no.
But Dr. Dixon had kind of hit all the points that I thought were important.
Yes, I think all those points are important. For me, I'm biased and I want to have my auditorium space. But I want it to be a multi-purpose space. Like I envision a stage and a backdrop that is one giant screen where your audio techs and your graphic design kids are designing sets there. Your career tech kids are building different things. And it's not fixed seating. Maybe it's the amphitheater steps, kind of like at Echo Kenwood. So then if you're doing an immersive experience showing kids career tech, they have the visual goggles and they're touching things in this space where things are projected on the walls and they're cooking virtually or doing robotics virtually, all in this big space. But I think having them in the schools and maybe a giant screen. I know we do at our church where it's a stage and the pulpit, but the entire wall-to-wall is a screen, and everything is projected on it that way. But I think, you know, when you have these spaces for the arts and, you know, all the different programs that are in the schools, you are involving more kids. So even though you could have a big space off-site and one play comes down, then you're eliminating a group of kids that are normally building the sets. Then how are you going to get that down and incorporate them? So having some of that stuff just to, you know, have some pride, have some intimacy in your school with, I did that, or I built that, or this wall was coming down, and then our career tech program, I learned how to tuck point it, and I redid this wall, and our class redid this wall, and it's a time capsule of projects that we did in our school. So I really like the auditorium space, but as a multi-purpose space with using technology, being able to incorporate different programs, being adaptable. If there is a program that is at COS, you can remote into the auditorium space and, you know, really be hands-on and involved. So I think that auditorium space, being adaptable, no fixed seating, and multi-purpose is pretty important for our school.
Very good comments. Yeah. Thank you. I think you got enough feedback.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That was fantastic.
And she's a Cleveland Heights grad, so.
No, Cleveland.
Cleveland, yes.
Glenville Tar Blooders.
So they did a lot, yes.
Okay.
We have about 10 more minutes for the discussion items. So a lot of what we have, because there's still the last 15 minutes I would like to talk about the next steps. So all of the items that were on discussion, we've talked about a lot of the idea of, are they worth the additional investment? And Stephen, you mentioned aquatics is great, yes, but what's it at what cost? And I think that stems to the last bullet item of community partnerships. of how the aquatics can be funded through, similar to the discussion, I can almost mirror the discussion that we had over the auditorium space with the idea of having aquatic spaces.
I agree with that.
So with that thought in mind, unless someone has a thought with aquatics, I would really like to hear some comments on the importance of investment for early learning. The OFCC will co-fund a certain number of pre-K special ed seats, but they will not fund early learning centers. Is the idea of incorporating early learning within the new facilities. What's that?
Could you repeat that, what you said was, could
The
you repeat that one
OFCC
more time?
will co-fund special ed, so students who have special needs,
Oh.
whether social, emotional, or physical health, they'll fund certain seats of preschool, but they will not fund an early learning center as part of an elementary school. Is early
Just a
learning,
clarification, and the funding though is only for special needs, not
Correct.
general, okay.
correct. So if an incorporation of an early learning center within the elementary schools or its own standalone facility, whatever that may be, would be an issue or an item that would be solely funded by the district. Early learning during our sessions has been brought up, again, at everyone, especially at the elementary board. Is early learning an investment that you feel is important?
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Since we have a limited amount of time,
sure.
and I'm not trying to draw a straight, short line, but if you think about that question, and I'm asking the community volunteers, would early learning fall in your top 3? That's what the reason I say that is we would cut the discussion saying, then we would, and of course for me it would.
Early learning
Okay,
is in
for
my
me
top
it would
3.
fall in my top 3, okay?
Absolutely.
So if we say that, then
Then-
but that's only me, not everyone here. So what do you guys think?
In my opinion, from my experience, early learning would have been essential. It's essential, especially if I had the opportunity to experience half of the things
Yeah.
I did in elementary, in middle, or even high school, or even middle school. I could have been far more ahead than I am right now.
So do we have a consensus then? What, right?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes.
Right?
Can I just say one more important point about why, or one important thing why it could be important is, we have, at least this is what I saw in the northern, people in the Region 4 meeting, they saw a lot of schools that seemed to be clustered together where there were there were more schools than kids. And it may be a way to do early learning, may be a way to use existing buildings to keep them open in a way that we don't have to, especially, we have the buildings just renovated in the last 10 years. And I don't know, there's a lot of equitable issues in that, but that may be one way that the early learning can be used. But what I really ask you to do, if you could come up with a way to do with these options, what you did with the blocks and the students, to give us a visual way, to give people a visual way of helping make decisions, that we have X amount of money, or what are you going to give up? I think that might be a way to talk to the community about this as well. That might help them see what's going
Yeah,
on.
from my perspective, early learning is such a critical thing. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I mean, go ahead and finish your point.
No, I won't forget mine. Go ahead. Sir. I'm the chair. I can say whatever, I got, so I don't want to.
So this, to me, this is very, very, very important. It's more important than what people give credit to, because I think everybody should be involved. You end up coming with situations like right now, we're under social emotional learning. And to me, that's really similar to what we're talking about right now. And that connects to top businesses who want to understand, pretty much background trauma in young kids. So why aren't, to me, the entire, like everything in government and city government and everything else, why isn't that going towards this? I mean, literally, people need to take responsibility for it, because we all know early learners are going to turn into adults. Yep. Let's be honest, the prison systems are taking advantage of it. They're making it so that they understand if a kid can't read by 3rd grade, they need to build more prisons. If they understand that, we should be understanding that too.
Yeah,
We
to
can take-
me, I'm with you. For me, and you grew up in the inner city, you understand it a little differently. And to get to these young minds as early as we can, to me, would be the most important thing that we could do. And if we had, to me, it would be my number one, even though I'm a career tech guy, right? So if I would have put, the only reason I said top 3 was just to make sure that this group had a voice on how important that would be. But I would put it at number 1, only because of to touch these young minds as soon as possible. That would be my thought. So I was just trying to draw a shorter line since we were out of time.
I appreciate the expediency. Thank you very much. And so that, I definitely appreciate the consensus of the importance of that topic. So thank you very much. Before we move on to our last slide, is there any other additional comments about the last phase or just anything in general?
I just want to compliment you on what you've done.
Oh, thank you very much.
Honestly, I could tell you from a community volunteer standpoint, I think the support that the board, staff, leadership, and what you guys have done to engage us as the community members has been outstanding. And this is something that I live on a day-to-day basis, and I've been impressed with the process, so thank you.
I truly appreciate that.
Dr. Dixon, thank you for your support of what they're doing, and all the staff, so thank you.
I just wanted to touch base on community partnerships.
Yes.
And once again, this is something that we deal with in the community centers, rec centers. But I think it's more important in the schools. We get businesses all the time that run to us because they have to do so many community, service situations. My thing is, I don't know if you go to figuring out a way to force big businesses, but the schools should be the first place where those partnerships come to, those dollars come to. Because we're always seeing teachers and young people with not enough. Anybody who knows a teacher know they go in their own pocket, to make sure things happen. So when it comes to community partnerships, like I said, we get them all the time in the rec centers, but I don't know how much because I'm not teaching anymore, but schools should be right there. Like, I don't care what big business it is, one of their obligations in terms of their community service to go straight to the school system.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a draft agenda for our next series of engagements. And the reason that it is a draft is because we would like your input on any different items that you would like to see or would like to discuss. What we propose is that we have our introductions when we come in. We talk about what we've done or who we are, why we're here, the typical approach. We report the data, similar to what I've done this evening. So keep everything at a high level of what resulted from the previous phase. So to put it bluntly, someone posted to me, we moved the blocks, now what? So now it's our opportunity to present the now what. We are going to present the academics information, the stuff that the information that Kira presented tonight would be part of our data report to the group. So this would be the most, probably the most calm or less active meeting that we've had so far, because it's not, we've tried to really make everything have movement and energy within the sessions as a community engagement component. This is probably going to be the most like a meeting. So we're going to present the data, present the academics information, and then the workshop itself is that we are going to have concepts of the boards are going to look very similar to what you saw within the simulations. But we're going to have the blocks in place, and we're going to have a description of what those blocks mean. And those are basically the majority of the data that we've received within the simulation activities. There's going to be, we're going to have rotating discussion. So they're just like the simulation. We'll have a high school, a middle school, and an elementary set up in the 3 concepts. And then there'll be discussion amongst the group. If nothing's really getting started, someone from the Leggett team or the CCS team will be within the group asking questions to get the conversation moving. The conversation will rotate to the three stations, and then there will be a recommendation ballot. So you're not walking in with, I know what I want. It's what is there, what is important to the group, and having an opportunity to discuss amongst the group themselves, and then they'll provide their recommendations of what they see. And right now, it looks like we're going to do something of a good, better, best for each of the three concepts. So you'll have an opportunity to weigh in. We're going to have the Post-it notes, so if you see a concept that you like except for something or in addition to, we're going to take that feedback. But that is what we're seeing as the activity. And then the ballots will be, basically the last part of the evening will be providing the recommendations. So in essence, it's probably a 15-minute sitting through a presentation, then about an hour or so worth of discussion, and then 15 to 20 minutes of putting in your recommendation. That's what we're proposing for the Phase 6 activities.
Sounds good to me. What do you guys think? Sounds good, right?
Right.
Yes.
For the academic data, one thing I know I've said this before, but I don't think I've seen this yet here. One of the most useful things we got in the last facilities planning I was on was a chart of all the high schools with the number of kids at the school and the number of electives they had, the variety of classes. And you can see on that chart, bigger classes, bigger high schools mean better programming, means more, and it's really horrible to see some of the schools just have very little compared to others. And I think a lot of people are skeptical when you tell them you'll get a bigger school, you get better programs, but show them what the kids are missing now, especially at the schools that are like 400 high school students. I think that's important. The two other things, whatever you do, just trade-offs. People need to be able to tell us what's more important than this. Make sure we get the trade-offs involved. And one thing we haven't discussed tonight that I think we need to hear on is the role of lotterying into schools, because a lot of that's a value judgment that there are pros and cons on both sides, where if you make a high school on the north side big enough to accommodate lots of lottery kids, you may get lots of lottery kids in the school, which is, in some way, it's a lot fairer. You make the school more diverse in a lot of ways, but then you're also taking kids who could be in the neighborhood schools where they are, and you are making it harder to have maintain schools in other parts of town. So I think having that idea, the value judgment on how we want to deal with lotterying among neighborhood schools, I think is important.
Good, thank you. That's a good comment.
So with that, that is my presentation for the evening. I truly appreciate the participation, and all of the items that we have not addressed yet, we will talk amongst our team to address. Mr. Chairman, I truly appreciate the compliment. That really means a lot. There's a lot of people that put a lot of work, and so I will let them know that it is appreciated, and thank you very much.
Yeah, Dennis, thank you very much, and Kira, thank you for your presentation, and Dr. Dixon, thank you for your leadership and also your comments, and fellow community volunteers. This was very effective. I want to truly thank you for your comments, your intellect, your thoughtfulness. Hopefully everyone feels the passion we have for the young, bright minds that are in our community, and what we really want to do to contribute to the quality of their lives. So, and that's a great segue into what's going to happen here with the transform phase. You know, we have a meeting on November 30th, and I think it's really important if we could have this level of interaction at that next meeting and get challenge some of our other community volunteers to make sure they're there. I think it's important that this next phase is going to be really important. So I looking forward to the next meeting. So with no objection, the meeting is adjourned.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you.